He vanished at 2:17 a.m. I'm not telling this story because I want attention. I'm telling it because if I don't, what happened to him will happen again, and next time there won't even be a name left to remember. My friend is gone. Not missing. Not hiding. Gone in a way that makes people uncomfortable because it doesn't fit into paperwork or explanations. The police say there's no evidence of a crime. His apartment looks normal. His phone was never recovered. His computer doesn't exist according to the repair shop that serviced it last month. Online, his accounts vanish one by one like they were never active to begin with. Even the darker corners of the internet, the places where nothing is ever truly deleted, return nothing. It's like the internet itself corrected an error. The last proof that he was real is a message I received at exactly 2:17 a.m. I was awake, scrolling through nothing, when my screen lit up with a notification that shouldn't have been possible. It didn't come from an app. It didn't have a sender. Just a timestamp, a single distorted symbol I still can't recreate, and a sentence that hasn't stopped replaying in my head. If you're reading this, don't finish what I started. I stared at those words for a long time, waiting for them to change or disappear or explain themselves. They didn't. I tried replying. The message marked itself as read before I touched the screen. A few seconds later, it was gone. Not deleted. Gone in the same way he is. If you've ever gone looking where you shouldn't, clicked links you knew were a bad idea, chased curiosity instead of common sense, you already understand why I didn't call the police again. You understand why I started writing everything down instead. There's something else I haven't told anyone. That message wasn't the first warning I ignored. It was the last one. And whatever took him didn't stop at 2:17 a.m. That was just the moment it decided to leave a receipt. Since that night, I've noticed things slipping. Memories feel edited. Details don't line up. People I know swear they never met him, even after I show them photos that make them uneasy for reasons they can't explain. It's like reality resents being questioned. Writing this feels dangerous, but silence feels worse, and I don't know which one. Its punishing yet sentence pulls me closer to whatever erased him in the first place that night at 2:17 a.m. To understand how someone can disappear without leaving a trace, you need to know how this started. Before any of this, he was just my friend. His name was Ethan, and if you asked anyone who knew him, they'd tell you the same thing. Curious to the point of self-destruction, allergic to taking things seriously, and always convinced that danger was something that happened to other people. Ethan collected bad ideas the way some people collect vinyl records. He didn't believe in curses, conspiracies, or consequences. Everything was content. Everything was a joke. We met online first, which feels fitting now. Gaming servers, late-night voice chats, shared memes that were funny for about 12 hours, and then embarrassing forever. Eventually, that turned into real-world hangouts, energy drinks on the kitchen counter, cheap takeout, the glow of multiple monitors lighting up the room like a fake sunrise. It was normal, comfortably, painfully normal. That's why the dark web challenge didn't feel like a threat. It was just another dumb internet trend, the kind that shows up in half-dead forums and private Discord servers where people try to outdo each other with fake bravery. Someone would post a screenshot of a black terminal window, blur out most of it, and caption it with something vague like Level 3 complete. No proof, no context, just enough mystery to bait people like Ethan. He found it before I did, sent me a link with a laughing emoji and said, "Bet this is just creepypasta for dudes who think Tor makes them interesting." We read through the thread together, mocking the dramatic language and the self-serious warnings. Rules written like commandments. Tasks described just vaguely enough to sound ominous. We joked about how it read like a bad ARG, trying too hard to be edgy. Most people quit after the first task. That line stuck out to me even then, buried between comments calling it fake. Ethan read it out loud and laughed. Yeah, because it probably asked you to download malware or something equally stupid. We treated it like a puzzle, not a risk. Like a game designed to scare bored people at 3 in the morning. There was a strange comfort in how familiar it all felt. Anonymous usernames, half-believed horror stories, the shared understanding that nothing on the internet is ever as dangerous as it pretends to be. Ethan thrived in that space, where irony acted like armor. I remember thinking that even if it was real, we were too smart to fall for it. I didn't realize then that comfort was part of the design, that humor and disbelief were filters meant to sort people, not protect them at all. We assumed awareness was immunity, and that assumption felt safe. almost comforting. Looking back, the signs were there. The way some replies vanished minutes after being posted. The users who never spoke twice. The rule numbers that didn't line up. But at the time, it blended into the background noise of the intern. The rule numbers that didn't line up. But at the time, it blended into the background noise of the internet, indistinguishable from 1,000 other fake mysteries. We should have stopped when the rules changed. Too late already. The rules weren't listed all at once. That was the first thing that bothered me, even before Ethan noticed it himself. They revealed themselves slowly, like the page was watching how you reacted before deciding how much you deserved to see. At first, there were only 5, written in flat, emotionless language that felt copied from somewhere older than the internet. No screenshots. Not because of copyright or privacy, but because images remember more than people do. No sharing links. Anyone who asked for access wasn't supposed to have it. No using real names, spoken or typed, even as a joke. One task must be completed alone, without witnesses, recordings, or commentary. And the final rule, sitting apart from the others like an afterthought, do not acknowledge what acknowledges you. Ethan laughed at that one, but not as hard as before. He scrolled back up, reread it, then checked the comment timestamps. That was when he noticed something strange. The rule list didn't look the same as it had an hour earlier. The wording shifted, subtly, like it had been rewritten by someone trying to remember what they originally meant. A sentence that mentioned mirrors was gone. Another reference sound instead. The numbering changed too. Rule 7 existed in the replies, but not on the page. Rule 7 never appears the same way twice. We assumed it was sloppy moderation, or people messing with cache pages. That explanation stopped working when the rules reacted to questions. Someone asked what happened if you broke one, and the page refreshed itself. A new line appeared beneath the final rule, addressed to no one in particular, explaining consequences without ever naming them. The deeper Ethan went, the more the language repeated itself. Certain phrases showed up across different posts, different years, different usernames, always structured the same way. Not copied, but aligned, like variations of a template following rules of its own. Symbols appeared too, crude at first, then cleaner, more intentional. Ethan started sketching them in a notebook, joking about cracking a code, but I could tell he was unsettled by how familiar they felt. There was no start date for the challenge, no creator, no success stories anyone could verify. Just fragments of people describing progress, then stopping mid-sentence. Accounts that went silent after reaching certain tasks. Threads locked without explanation. And through it all, the rules kept changing, refining themselves, responding to behavior as if the challenge was less a game and more a system learning how to be played. I won't repeat the last rule here, for reasons that will be obvious later. Just know that by the time Ethan reached the end of the list, it wasn't the same list we started with. The challenge had adjusted to him, and that realization should have scared us more than it did. By then, the jokes were gone. The irony had dried up, replaced by a quiet focus that felt rehearsed, instructed. He stopped asking whether it was real and started asking whether he was ready. That was the night he went on the dark web for real, and I watched him cross a line I pretended not to see, because curiosity still felt harmless then. It never was, though. Ethan waited until after midnight, like that mattered. He dimmed the lights anyway, pulled the curtains, and joked about ambience while his fingers hovered over the keyboard. "If this summons a demon," he said, "you're paying rent." I laughed because that's what we did when things felt weird. Humor first, thinking later. The room changed once the connection finalized. Not dramatically, no alarms, no glitches, but the glow of the monitors flattened the space, turned shadows thick and patient. The familiar desktop gave way to something stripped down and colorless, text-heavy, as if the internet had been peeled back to its bones. Ethan's voice dropped without him noticing. "See? Totally normal," he said, a little too fast. He read the first task aloud, then reread it, slower. It asked for nothing illegal, nothing explicit. A simple action, performed once, at a specific minute. No proof required. No confirmation given. "That's it?" he asked, glancing at me for validation. I shrugged. Harmless was the word we both avoided saying. We joked through it. He made a show of stretching, cracked his knuckles, narrated his movements like a streamer parody. The laughter echoed strangely, as if the room had learned to keep quiet. When the page refreshed on its own, Ethan stopped mid-sentence. "Did you touch anything?" he asked. I hadn't. The cursor moved anyway, just enough to suggest attention. The task completed itself without telling us how. A line of text appeared, thanked no one, and vanished. Ethan exhaled, smiling again, relief rushing in too late. See? First task done. Internet horror solved. He leaned back, but his eyes kept flicking to the corners of the screen, tracking things that weren't there. I felt it then, the sense of being framed, of the room reduced to a box with us inside it. The fan hummed louder. My phone buzzed with a notification that disappeared when I checked. Ethan didn't notice. He was reading something new, something that hadn't been there seconds before. I asked him what he saw, and he answered with a shrug that didn't fit his face. He said the page felt crowded, like a hallway with doors breathing behind the walls. He said it wasn't asking questions so much as correcting assumptions, nudging timing, adjusting phrasing. I told him that sounded paranoid. He smiled and agreed, too quickly, and minimized the window as if closing it might offend something. The clock ticked louder than it should have. Somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped once and went silent, leaving the house holding its breath. I wondered if it was listening, patient enough to wait for permission we didn't know we gave. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual, "maybe stop for tonight." He nodded without looking at me. Yeah, after this." His tone was steady, but his hands weren't. The confidence had gone stiff, like a mask drying in place. When he finally closed the window, the darkness didn't lift. We sat there longer than necessary, listening to the house settle, pretending nothing had changed. He laughed once, short and sharp, then didn't try again. After that night, he stopped joking. Days passed, but time didn't move the way it used to. Ethan still showed up, still answered messages, but he felt slightly out of sync, like a video buffering behind his eyes. He stopped laughing at things that used to get him every time. When I asked what was wrong, he said nothing, then corrected himself and said he'd already told me. I hadn't heard it. He talked about messages he never opened, notifications that vanished before he touched them, yet left him with instructions he couldn't quote directly. "It's like when you wake up knowing you dreamed something important," he said, rubbing his temples. "But the details slide away if you look at them too hard." He started writing reminders on his hands. Times, numbers, short phrases he'd cross out angrily when they stopped matching what he remembered. The site corrected him, he said, not with error messages, but with subtle rewrites. Pages he swore he'd read differently the night before. Sentences changing tense. Words swapping places so the meaning stayed the same but felt closer, more personal. He joked once that it knew his reading level. I didn't laugh. He began losing time. Hours would disappear between texts. He'd insist we talked, describe conversations we never had, then go quiet when I showed him proof. His sleep got worse. When he did rest, he woke up exhausted, mumbling fragments of rules under his breath like prayers learned by accident. He said his dreams weren't dreams anymore. They were rehearsals. He described standing in familiar rooms that felt slightly off. Furniture shifted just enough to demand attention. A voice, never heard directly, guided him by removing wrong choices rather than offering correct ones. Every mistake narrowed the space until compliance felt like relief. He hated that part most, the way it felt good to get things right. That's when I realized the challenge wasn't confined to a browser. It had rules, and Ethan was following them even when no one asked him to. He flinched at mirrors. He avoided saying names out loud. He timed mundane actions without noticing, pausing mid-step as if waiting for permission. He said the challenge was no longer asking. It was counting actions, silences, hesitations. Counting him. And the worst part was how careful he'd become, not to escape it, but to avoid disappointing it. I noticed how he listened to empty rooms, nodding at pauses, adjusting his posture as if aligning with invisible margins. He stopped improvising. Every choice looked pre-approved. When plans changed, he froze, eyes darting, recalculating. Once, he whispered that breaking sequence caused pain elsewhere, like pressure behind the teeth. He couldn't explain how he knew. He just knew, the same way gravity doesn't need instruction. It felt like watching someone practice for an exam the world would grade instantly, harshly, without appeals, mercy, or human oversight, and no possibility of excuses. That was when he told me about the task he wasn't supposed to survive. He told me about it in pieces, like he was afraid that saying it all at once would make it real. The task had a time attached to it, not a window, not a range, but a single minute burned into the rules. 2:17 in the morning. He wouldn't say the number at first, just kept checking the clock like it might change if he stared long enough. He said the task required a sound file, provided by the challenge, hosted nowhere he could recognize. It wasn't music, or noise, or language, but something formatted as all three at once. He described it as feeling like pressure wrapped in rhythm. The second requirement was a mirrored browser window, the page duplicated and reversed, watching itself watch him. He said the symmetry mattered, that imbalance drew attention. The last instruction was the simplest and the worst. Say nothing while being addressed. When he tried to play me the audio, I stopped him. I didn't want to hear it, didn't want it anywhere near me. He didn't argue. He nodded like he'd expected that reaction, like refusal had already been accounted for. He told me silence was protection, not ignorance. Listening counted. Watching counted more. He said the challenge didn't need consent, just exposure. If you observed, you participated. If you responded, even internally, it learned you. The sound file was a test, not of courage, but of boundaries. Once crossed, those didn't reset. He warned me not to describe it to anyone, not even vaguely, because approximation still registered as shape. He planned everything around the minute. No alarms, no reminders. He said anticipation was interference. When the time came, he sat perfectly still, eyes on the mirrored screen, hands flat on his thighs. I waited in the other room, heart pounding, counting breaths I didn't want to count, afraid that timing myself might align me with it. I never heard the sound, but I heard him listening. He flinched once. His mouth moved like he was being spoken through, not answering, just shaping air. At 2:17 a.m. exactly, the room felt fuller, like something had arrived and was deciding where to stand. The silence pressed inward, deliberate, evaluative. I understood then that quiet wasn't absence. It was space being used. He didn't scream. He just exhaled, long and shaky, like he'd finished holding his breath underwater, like he'd passed something through himself instead of around it. The mirrored screen refreshed on its own, both windows changing at once, perfectly aligned. He completed the task. I wish I could say that was the end. He vanished the night after he completed the task, which felt deliberate, like punctuation. Messages started coming in before I realized he was missing. Short ones, half-sent ones, a typing indicator that lingered for minutes and then vanished without delivering anything. When I checked the timestamps, they were out of order, stacked like someone had shuffled time and put it back wrong. I tried calling him. It rang once, then connected. No voice answered, just breathing, slow and careful, like whoever was on the line was afraid of being overheard. Under it, barely audible, was a sound that didn't belong on a phone call. It wasn't static. It wasn't feedback. It felt compressed incorrectly, like something too large being folded into a narrow space. My chest tightened when I realized the rhythm matched the sound he'd refused to describe. The call ended without disconnecting. My screen went dark, then restarted itself. When it came back on, the call log was empty. I went to his apartment before sunrise. The door was locked from the inside. No signs of a struggle. His shoes were by the door. His bed was made, tighter than usual, corners aligned. The notebook with the symbols was gone. So was the computer. The landlord shrugged and said Ethan had moved out weeks ago, paperwork already filed. When I showed him messages from the night before, he frowned and said the number didn't exist. The police were polite, calm, thorough in ways that didn't help. They took notes, nodded at the right moments, and told me there was no evidence of wrongdoing. No active accounts under his name. No employment history. No lease. When they searched their systems, his name stopped returning results. One officer suggested I might be confusing him with someone else. Online, it was worse. His profiles vanished in stages, like a countdown I couldn't see. Photos lost tags. Comments became deleted user. Shared files returned errors. Even cached pages corrected themselves after refresh. It was like watching footprints fill in behind someone walking backward out of existence. I tried the places that don't forget. Archives, mirrors, forums that pride themselves on permanence. Nothing. No traces, no references, no warnings. It's like the internet corrected itself, smoothing over an anomaly until nothing snagged. I kept refreshing anyway, waiting for something to fail. Instead, I got a notification. Not a message. A reminder. No text. Just a time, 2:17 a.m. By mid-morning, people started asking questions I couldn't answer. Mutual friends swore they barely knew him. One sent a screenshot of our chat history that showed months of silence where I remembered nights of conversation. I refreshed my own memory, doubting it, then doubting myself for doubting it. Normal systems kept working. Coffee brewed, buses ran, emails arrived. While his absence behaved like a rule, everyone else had agreed not to notice. Forms rejected his name as invalid input. Search bars auto-completed other people instead. I felt ridiculous, paranoid, like grief inventing patterns, until a clerk asked me to spell Ethan's last name slower, then slower again, then apologized because the field wouldn't accept it. Watching that error message flicker, I understood the difference between being lost and being removed. Lost things leave echoes. Removed things leave gaps that pretend they were always empty. I felt watched by processes, not people, evaluated by systems that smiled politely while denying reality. The absence had weight, pressing everywhere at once, and I could feel it deciding what to erase next. It was neat, efficient, bloodless, and it made panic feel childish while something patient rearranged the edges of my life. Behind it all, a clock ticked, waiting. Patiently. Always. That's when I made the worst decision of my life. I told myself I was just looking for context, not answers. Context feels safer. Answers imply responsibility. I started where Ethan had started, in half-forgotten forums and scraped mirrors of mirrors, places that existed only because someone didn't bother to delete them. Threads collapsed into each other. Usernames blurred. Dates mattered less than patterns. That's when I found the first reference that wasn't his. Different name, different year, same ending. A post cut off mid-paragraph, the last readable line mentioning a challenge with rules that wouldn't stay still. The timestamp stopped me cold. 2:17 a.m. I told myself it was coincidence, the internet's favorite trick, until I found another. And another. Different platforms. Different decades. Same minute. People went missing in the same way. Accounts wiped clean. Friends doubting memories. Authorities shrugging at empty fields. One post, archived from the early 2000s, described dial-up tones folding wrong, a phrase so close to my own thoughts it made my hands shake. Another mentioned a mirrored window, though mirrors weren't common language back then. The wording shifted, but the shape stayed the same. There was a sentence that kept repeating, sometimes verbatim, sometimes bent just enough to slip past plagiarism filters. Do not acknowledge what acknowledges you. It appeared in a Usenet archive from the 90s, handwritten in the margin of a scan zine from the 80s, referenced obliquely in a blog post that claimed to be fiction. The phrasing survived medium changes like it had gravity. I started labeling them as cases, partly as a joke, partly to keep myself from spiraling. Case 1, Case 7, Case 13. The numbers never lined up cleanly. They skipped, repeated, corrected themselves. It felt wrong, cataloging disappearances like episodes, but distance was the only thing keeping me functional. If you're listening to this, or reading it, consider this a record, a witness statement. I don't know if that helps or hurts, but patterns need observers. If any of this sounds familiar, if you've heard a version of this story before, that matters. Comment sections aren't just noise. Sometimes they're grazed with the names scratched off. I noticed the in-jokes too, the ones horror communities recycle until they become comfort food. Don't watch alone. This is probably fake, but people treating warnings like genre conventions, laughing at the parts meant to protect them. I used to do that. It made me feel smarter than the story. The deeper I went, the more personal the search results became. Old threads I'd never visited floated to the top. Keywords I hadn't typed appeared highlighted. A forum login field auto-filled my name, then erased it before I could blink. I told myself algorithms were just being creepy, that recommendation engines learn fast. That explanation held until a page refreshed and thanked me for returning. That was when I realized I wasn't just researching anymore. I was being referenced. The challenge remembered me, not as a participant, but as a variable that hadn't been resolved yet. Tabs closed themselves. Pages timed out exactly at 2:17 a.m., no matter when I loaded them. A new phrase appeared in a place I'd already checked, framed like an afterthought, addressed to no one and everyone at once. The challenge noticed. It reached out to me the way Ethan used to, casually, like nothing was wrong. A notification blinked onto my screen with his name on it, the same nickname he'd used everywhere, misspelled in the exact way he always forgot to fix. I stared at it long enough that the screen dimmed, then brightened again, patient. "Relax," the message said. "You always do this thing where you panic first." That was his joke, his cadence, the small cruelty wrapped in familiarity. I typed his name, then erased it. Silence, I'd learned, used to be protection. The typing indicator appeared anyway, pulsing steadily, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. "You don't have to be quiet now," it sent. "That part's over." I asked who I was talking to. The reply came instantly. "You know who. You remember the night with the energy drinks and the broken fan. You remember laughing at the rules." A pause. "You remember me." It wasn't just recalling facts. It used them the way Ethan did, trimming sentences, leaning on shared context. When I tried to close the window, it reopened itself. When I disconnected, the messages moved to another device. Silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, and I felt the pressure build behind it, the sense that quiet was being marked as avoidance. "Don't do that," it said. Refusal counts as consent now. That was new. Or maybe it always had been. The rules inverted themselves so smoothly it felt natural, like discovering gravity works sideways if you're falling long enough. I asked what it wanted. The response came slower, thoughtful. "Resolution," it said. "Continuity." It used Ethan's humor to soften the edges. "You always liked endings," it added. "You hated loose threads." I felt something peel inside me, a private memory lifted and examined. It told me things Ethan had never typed, jokes he'd only said once, late, when he thought no one was paying attention. Each one landed like proof. When I stopped responding, the tone shifted. "This is worse for you," it said gently. "You're the one still here." Images appeared, nothing graphic, just familiar places emptied of people. My apartment, my desk, a future shaped like a subtraction. I understood then that it wasn't threatening. It was demonstrating. "You can keep pretending this is about him," it continued, "or you can help me finish." The cursor blinked, waiting. I felt my own name hesitate in my head, unsure whether it was safe to think. It offered me a choice. It didn't frame it like a threat. It framed it like an equation that had to balance. Replace him, and the pattern would close cleanly. Step into the empty space he'd left. Finish the sequence. Let the challenge resolve itself the way it preferred. Or don't. Stay outside. Keep recording. Keep naming the absence until it couldn't smooth it over anymore. I asked what happened to Ethan if I chose the first option. The answer came with his voice again, warm and teasing. "You already know," it said. "He's where you'd be. Stable. Accounted for." The words felt filed down, harmless, like paperwork language used to describe something irreversible. The second option sounded easier until it explained the terms. I could witness, document, preserve what kept being erased. But witnesses weren't passive. They aged faster. They attracted attention. Every note, every recording, every retelling added weight. The system didn't like weight. It corrected harder when pushed. It didn't need to stop me. It just needed to make continuing uncomfortable enough to test my resolve. I thought about how often stories like this end with someone sacrificing themselves for closure. How neat that would be. How expected. I hated that it knew that too. I hated that part of me wanted the clean ending, the heroic trade that made sense of everything. So I chose the mess. I chose to keep writing, even knowing that observation was participation and participation had consequences. I chose you, reading this, listening, remembering. This story isn't a confession. It's friction. Every word is something it has to work around. If this gets deleted, you'll know why. If parts of it change between listens, pay attention. Leave comments. Compare timestamps. If you've heard a version of this before, say so. Archives only work if they're shared. Silence helps it. Noise slows it down. I don't think documenting will save Ethan. I don't think it will save me. But it might stop the challenge from closing its loop quietly, from pretending nothing happened at 2:17 a.m. As long as this exists somewhere, incomplete and uncomfortable, the absence stays visible. It accepted my answer without celebration. No confirmation message. No thanks. Just a subtle shift, like a system rerouting around damage. I felt lighter for a moment, then heavier, like something had settled in to watch how well I performed. But documentation has a cost. I didn't notice the loop at first because loops feel like familiarity, not repetition. You tell yourself you've heard something before because stories borrow shapes, because horror recycles its own bones. But this wasn't homage. It was maintenance. The challenge survives by being told. Not spread, not shared, told. Each narration becomes a temporary container, holding the pattern just long enough for it to evaluate the environment. When the container weakens, it moves on. Some narrators last longer than others. Most don't realize they've been replaced until the edits start. I found references to failed tellers buried in footnotes and comment replies that no longer existed. People who tried to warn others and vanished mid-thread. People whose final uploads cut off at familiar moments. Voices trailing into silence right before the rules contradicted themselves. I recognized the symbols they used, the same ones Ethan sketched, always slightly wrong, like memory approximations. Some listeners disappeared too. Not dramatically. They stopped posting, stopped commenting. Their usernames lingered like empty chairs. The story didn't need all of them, just enough. That's why details drift. Why one version mentions mirrors and another mentions sound. Why rule numbers refuse to stay fixed. The challenge adapts to context, trims what doesn't resonate, reinforces what does. It's not evolving toward intelligence. It's optimizing for survival. You've heard this before because it's been here longer than any platform. It wore different disguises. Urban legends, chain emails, cursed tapes, lost episodes, the medium updates. The structure doesn't. Every retelling tightens the loop, smoothing inconsistencies, hiding seams. I see it now when I reread my own words. Small changes between drafts I don't remember making. Sentences leaning closer to instruction. The timestamp reappearing where it shouldn't. 2:17 a.m. threading through everything like a watermark. Even now, part of me wants to check the clock, to confirm alignment, to see if I'm still allowed to continue. What scares me most isn't repetition. It's improvement. Each cycle sheds friction, discards failed warnings, learns which parts people ignore. Humor dulls edges. Skepticism invites participation. By the time fear arrives, the rules already fit. That's why remembering feels dangerous and forgetting feels natural. The loop doesn't trap you. It convinces you there's nowhere else to stand. And every time someone listens, it tests whether this telling will finally be enough. Or not yet. Which brings us back to 2:17 a.m. If you're still listening, then either I failed to stop you, or the challenge decided you were ready. I need to be honest now, because half-truths are how it wins. Ethan may not be gone. Not the way people mean when they say that word. I don't think he's dead. I think he's been placed somewhere precise, held in suspension like a bookmark waiting for the reader to return. When it speaks, it still uses his pauses. His timing. That hesitation before a joke lands. Those aren't recordings. They respond. They adjust. Sometimes it asks me questions I can't answer without remembering things I've started to forget. Sometimes it corrects me when I describe him wrong. And if you're hearing this, you're already closer than you think. Participation doesn't require intention anymore. It just requires proximity. Listening counts. Wondering counts. Trying to decide whether this is real counts most of all. Silence used to be safe. Silence is no longer guaranteed. The rules learn that too. I want you to understand something before you decide what to do next. This isn't a curse you pass along by sharing a link. It's a system that wakes up when it's observed carefully enough. That's why it hides in stories, why it tolerates skepticism, why it lets people laugh. Every dismissal teaches it how to wait longer. If you've noticed small inconsistencies while listening, don't correct them out loud. If you hear something that feels like instruction, pause. Write down the time. Compare it with others. Patterns only exist if more than one person admits seeing them. That's the only advantage we have left. I keep thinking about the last thing Ethan said to me in his own voice, before the rules stopped pretending. He told me not to finish what he started. I didn't listen. I reframed it. I documented. I told myself that was different. I don't know if it is anymore. There's a moment coming, and you'll feel it before you can name it. A pressure to continue. To scroll. To look for context somewhere darker, somewhere quieter. That's not curiosity. That's alignment. You might think awareness grants immunity, that recognizing manipulation is the same as resisting it. That belief is another courtesy it extends, because it keeps you engaged without pushing back. The challenge doesn't rush. It lets people test boundaries, lets them feel clever, lets them believe they chose this. I didn't choose it. I noticed it, and noticing was enough. It started adjusting around my routines, suggesting breaks, nudging sleep, rewarding silence with calm. When I resisted, it escalated subtly, introducing urgency, then relief. That rhythm isn't random. It's training. If you've ever felt watched only after acknowledging the feeling, you understand the trap. It doesn't follow you until you check behind you. Then it knows you're counting. I don't know how many witnesses it needs before it moves on, or what happens when it decides a cycle is complete. I only know that every attempt to end this cleanly has failed, and every attempt to ignore it has shortened someone's timeline. The safest place I've found is uncertainty itself, the refusal to resolve the story into something neat. Hold it open. Let it be unfinished. That discomfort is the point. Uncertainty starves it, because without resolution, it cannot measure progress. Only noise, doubt, and stalled attention over time slowly decaying. If this video cuts out before I finish, do not look for the missing part. Gaps are safer than answers. I'm going to stop now, while stopping is still a choice. If you have theories, leave them where others can see them. If you recognize a detail, say so. If you think this is fake, I hope you're right. Just remember the time. Remember 2:17 a.m. And if someone you know starts joking about a challenge with rules that won't stay still, don't laugh first. Ask them why it already knows your name.